My sister was a missing persons case for years. I think I just found her. My sister struggled with severe panic attacks her entire life. It started when she was 12. She witnessed our neighbor murder his wife during a home invasion. She'd been babysitting their toddler and hid with the child in an upstairs closet for 3 hours, keeping the baby quiet while listening to everything below. After the murder, my sister begged our parents for therapy. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, jumped at every sound. But my parents, both senior partners at their law firm, refused. You weren't the one who lived through it, my mother said coldly. The neighbors are the real victims. You were just hiding. My father then added his favorite line, someone's gotta pay for this big house. We gotta go work. Her breaking point came 2 years later, still having never attended therapy once. I came home early from college for spring break and found her in the bathroom, cutting parallel lines into her thighs with Dad's razor. The cuts spelled out HELP in thin, precise lines. When I showed our parents, my mother sighed like I'd interrupted her with something trivial. She's attention-seeking, she said, returning to her laptop. That was the moment I knew I had to save her myself. I withdrew half my college savings and booked me and her tickets to Alaska. You see, the one thing about my sister, even through all this, was her obsession with the ocean. She said the waves drowned out the sounds from that night. She despised our suburban life, the big house that meant more to our parents. And that's why what happened on that trip was even stranger. We met this old fisherman named Earl, who ran a boat salvage yard. My sister made me spend every free hour there, and on our last night, Earl pulled me aside. He said my sister had salt water in her veins, meaning some souls were meant for the sea, and keeping them on land was cruel. Back then, I thought he was just crazy, but after we returned, Alaska consumed her thoughts. She started vanishing for hours, returning with sand in her shoes despite the nearest beach being 5 hours away. She started watching boat restoration videos at 3 a.m., taking meticulous notes. She began me boats for sale online, plotted routes, and researched commercial fishing licenses. But here's where it gets even weirder. She also started learning skills that seemed random. Diesel engine repair, solar panel installation, water desalination. I remember a specific family dinner she had excitement in her eyes like never before. She told Mom and Dad about her plans to go live on a boat. I'd genuinely never seen her so hopeful. But of course my parents shut her down with the same cold indifference they'd shown about her trauma. You're not special, my mother said during a rare family dinner. Millions of kids witness violence. They don't run away to Alaska, my father added. Someone's gotta pay for this lifestyle. You think we work 80-hour weeks so you can play sailor? They threw out her navigation tools and blocked sailing websites on our router. That night, I heard my sister sobbing through our shared wall. I remember speaking to her the day after, but she just stayed quiet. I thought she started withdrawing again. She began giving away possessions. She sold her laptop and donated her unworn designer collection to charity. Then, 3 weeks before she vanished, she became eerily calm. The anxiety that had tortured her for years just evaporated. And then one morning, I found her goodbye letter. It was devastating. She wrote that she was going into the ocean to drown. At least that way she could die surrounded by what she loved. She apologized for being weak, for not being the daughter our parents deserved. She left messages for specific people, told me to take care of her friend Marcus, who also had anxiety, reminded Mom about her mammogram appointment, even mentioned our mail carrier Joyce by name. The police searched for 2 weeks. They found her car at a desert trailhead, her phone and wallet inside, her antidepressant prescription in the glove compartment, but nobody. We held a memorial with an empty casket. The grief shattered our family. My parents finally stopped working, but only because their law firm forced them to take leave after Dad broke down during a deposition. They blamed themselves, but not for the right reasons. We should have monitored her more closely, my mother kept saying. We gave her too much freedom. They moved to Michigan, claiming Phoenix had too many memories, but I knew they were running from their guilt. They still send me texts about their new jobs, their new house. I stayed in Phoenix, fell into my own depression, spent 3 years in therapy. I kept her letter in my nightstand drawer, reading it obsessively, but the more I read, the more the details didn't add up. The trailhead where they found her car. It was exactly 5.2 nautical miles from our house, a measurement she often circled in one of her notebooks. The desert path she supposedly took, it led to an abandoned private airstrip from the 1960s that wasn't on modern maps. I started investigating. That's how I'd found out she'd been active on sailing forums, talking to people who lived off-grid on boats. I discovered more and more strange things like that, but there was something that always bothered me about that letter no matter what I found. The paragraph breaks were bizarre, sentences cut off mid-thought, new paragraphs starting randomly. For 3 years, I analyzed it. I tried everything. UV light, chemical tests for invisible ink, pattern analysis. Then I remembered something she'd shown me about maritime navigation. Old sailors hid messages in plain sight using mathematical patterns. Last month, after 5 years of staring at those pages, it clicked. The word count of each paragraph, when converted to decimals, formed GPS coordinates. They pointed to a remote bay in Alaska, the exact spot where we'd gone kayaking on our trip. I booked the next flight to Anchorage with trembling hands. The coordinates burned in my mind as I packed a single bag, throwing in warm clothes and the letter that had consumed 5 years of my life. At the airport, I kept checking my phone, expecting someone to stop me, to tell me I was crazy for chasing ghosts. The flight felt endless. I studied the letter again, running my fingers over her handwriting. The phrase, salvage what remains, suddenly jumped out at me. She'd used it twice, both times oddly placed. My laptop battery died as I searched for salvage yards near those coordinates, but not before I found one result. Earl's salvage yard, the same place we'd visited 5 years ago. Landing in Anchorage hit me with memories. The airport looked exactly the same, down to the stuffed grizzly bear in the arrivals area. I headed straight for the rental car counter when someone called my name. A young man in his 20s stood near the exit, wearing work clothes and a nervous expression. He had Earl's same weathered hands, the kind that came from years of boat work. He tried to leave when I approached, but I grabbed his sleeve. He knew who I was, recognized my face immediately. This was Jake, Earl's son. He'd been the one who answered when I'd called the salvage yard number from Phoenix. His wedding ring caught my attention, an unusual knot pattern I'd seen before. In one of my sister's sailing videos she'd posted years ago. Jake's resistance crumbled when I mentioned her name. He admitted she'd contacted him monthly for years, sending updates through various channels. But 6 months ago, the messages stopped abruptly. The admission hit me like a physical blow. She'd been alive all this time, letting me grieve, letting our parents suffer. A woman emerged from a truck nearby, Jake's wife, Emma. She'd been listening, and now she stepped forward with a mixture of defiance and protectiveness. She revealed what Jake wouldn't. My sister worked as a freelance boat mechanic and navigator, moving between remote locations. They'd been forwarding supplies to her through a network of fishing vessels. My phone buzzed incessantly. 47 missed calls from a Michigan number, our parents. I had to decide immediately, involve them or pursue this alone. The choice felt like standing at a cliff's edge. I powered off my phone and asked Jake about boat rentals. He reluctantly agreed, but Emma insisted on accompanying us. Insurance, she called it, though her eyes suggested suggested she meant protection. The harbor stretched before us, a maze of masts and weathered hulls. I searched every surface, every logbook, until I found it. A boat maintenance record with a small anchor doodle in the margin. The same anchor she'd drawn obsessively after our Alaska trip, always with 13 specific dots around it. My hands shook as I photographed the page. An old dock worker noticed my interest. He mentioned the hermit girl who traded fresh fish for engine parts and canned goods. His description made my breath catch. He mentioned a scar on her right thigh, exactly where I'd found her cutting that day in the bathroom. The scar that spelled out her desperate plea for help. Jake's phone started pinging with text messages. His face paled as he read them. Someone was angry about him breaking their agreement. The number showed as unlisted, but Jake's reaction told me these weren't empty threats. Emma watched him with an expression I couldn't quite read. Concern mixed with something else. Disappointment, maybe. Emma turned her attention to me, questioning my real intentions. She suggested my sister had good reasons for disappearing, that maybe she didn't want to be found. Her words carried weight, the kind that came from personal experience. I could see she was protecting something, or someone. The marina office had security cameras. I convinced the manager to check footage from 2 weeks ago with a story about a stolen boat part. There, on grainy black and white video, was a figure in a familiar hooded sweatshirt. My old college hoodie, the one she'd claimed as hers years ago. The hood obscured the face, but the walk, the way she favored her left side slightly, I knew. Jake finally broke his silence about his father. Earl had died 3 years ago, helping someone escape what Jake called a bad situation. He wouldn't elaborate, but Emma's sharp intake of breath suggested the story connected to my sister. The pieces were forming a picture I wasn't sure I wanted to see. Emma pulled me aside while Jake made phone calls. She revealed she'd been protecting my sister's location for a specific reason. My sister had saved her life. After Emma's first child, she'd fallen into severe postpartum depression. My sister had found her through an online support group and talked her through the darkest moments. They'd never met in person, but my sister had been her lifeline. Jake's phone revealed more secrets. Old text messages showed my sister had warned him about someone from Phoenix asking questions. The timestamp made my stomach drop. 1 week before I'd arrived. She'd known I was coming. She'd been watching, waiting, preparing. Jake admitted to destroying most of Earl's records about my sister, but had kept one photo. He wouldn't show it to me yet, holding it as leverage. My frustration boiled over when my credit card was declined at the marine supply store. A quick check revealed the truth. Our parents had tracked my Alaska purchase and frozen my accounts. The local sheriff, who turned out to be Jake's cousin, dismissed my concerns with practiced ease. His office walls displayed dozens of missing person flyers, each stamped with "Case closed, voluntary." He explained that people came to Alaska to disappear, and unless there was evidence of foul play, they had the right to stay lost. That night, I broke into Jake's salvage office. The lock was pathetic, probably intentional. Inside, I found what I needed. Boat registration documents under a false name, but with details only she would know. The boat's name was 13 Anchors, confirming my suspicion about her doodles. More documents revealed an elaborate system. She'd been monitoring weather patterns along West Coast shipping lanes, creating detailed charts of safe passages. The dates aligned with something darker. Each route corresponded with news reports of women fleeing domestic violence situations. She wasn't just hiding, she was helping others escape. The next morning, the harbor community closed ranks. Fuel was suddenly unavailable. The grocery store had supply issues. The cashier mentioned something about protecting their own as she turned me away. Jake and Emma watched from a distance, no longer pretending this was about boat rentals. Marcus called from Phoenix. He'd seen my credit card activity before the freeze and knew something was wrong. He admitted my sister had contacted him yearly until recently, always on his birthday, always from different numbers. He was booking a flight despite my protests. Jake's daughter, who couldn't have been more than 6, let something slip while I waited outside their house. She mentioned Aunt Sarah visiting last Christmas, bringing presents. Sarah was my sister's middle name, the one she'd always preferred, but our parents refused to use. Emma blocked my attempt to rent a different boat, claiming mechanical issues with every vessel I inquired about, but cracks were showing in their united front. A fisherman at the harbor bar, after his 4th beer, mentioned a woman matching my sister's description had asked about me 2 days ago. She'd wanted to know if I was alone, if I seemed well. Jake sent a text to my sister's old number while I watched from across the harbor parking lot. His fingers moved quickly across the screen, and I saw the message status change to read almost immediately. The typing indicator appeared for several seconds before disappearing without a reply. Jake's shoulders tensed as he stared at his phone, waiting for something that never came. I recognized the manipulation tactics immediately. They mirrored exactly what our parents had done for years. The gaslighting, the control disguised as concern, the way Jake positioned himself as the gatekeeper to my sister's safety. My hands clenched as I watched him pace near his truck, occasionally glancing in my direction to ensure I was still where he'd left me. An elderly woman emerged from the marine supply store carrying a heavy box. I rushed to help her, and she thanked me with a warm smile. As we walked to her car, she mentioned seeing a young woman matching my sister's description just last week, buying medical supplies and prenatal vitamins. The woman remembered because the buyer had looked exhausted but determined, moving slowly and carefully as if protecting something precious. Emma's daughter appeared at the harbor playground, accompanied by a babysitter. The child spotted me and waved enthusiastically before the sitter could redirect her. I approached slowly, pulling out my phone to show family photos from years ago. The little girl's eyes lit up as she recognized the images, and before the babysitter could intervene, she'd grabbed a piece of chalk and started drawing on the concrete. The picture showed a boat with a distinctive cabin configuration, one I'd seen in my sister's old sketches. I spent the afternoon photographing every boat maintenance log I could access at the marina. The pattern became clear, regular entries in the same handwriting, always signed with just an anchor symbol. The dates showed consistent presence every 2 to 3 weeks, with the most recent entry from just 4 days ago. My sister had been here, maintaining boats, living her life while I'd mourned her death. The Coast Guard office occupied a small building near the harbor master. I presented my case to a bored-looking officer who barely glanced up from his computer. He explained that without evidence of distress or danger, they couldn't conduct wellness checks on adults who chose to live off-grid. His dismissive tone reminded me of every authority figure who'd failed my sister over the years. A local teacher approached me outside the harbor cafe. She'd overheard my questions and wanted to help. She admitted that someone matching my sister's description had taught navigation classes at the community center under an assumed name. The students had loved her, calling her the best instructor they'd ever had. She'd taught them about weather patterns, emergency protocols, and how to read the subtle signs of the sea. Using a pattern from our childhood hide-and-seek games, I searched the area where my sister used to cache supplies during our Alaska trip. Behind a particular cluster of rocks, protected by a weatherproof container, I found her emergency stash: medical supplies, canned goods, water purification tablets, and a logbook detailing supply runs. The most recent entry was dated 2 days ago. Jake's ex-girlfriend called my phone from an unknown number. She'd heard about my search through the Harbor grapevine and wanted to warn me. After Earl's death, Jake had become increasingly controlling, trying to manage every aspect of my sister's refuge network. He'd started seeing himself as Earl's successor, but where Earl had helped people escape, Jake had begun trapping them in his own web of control. I maintained my composure when Jake confronted me at the fuel dock that evening. Instead of matching his aggressive energy, I spoke calmly about my concerns for my sister's well-being. My measured response seemed to unsettle him more than anger would have. Several dock workers watched our interaction, and I noticed their body language shifting. They were beginning to see through Jake's protective facade. That night, I found a boat key slipped under my motel room door. No note, no explanation, just a worn key with a float attached. The room number etched on the float matched a slip I'd photographed earlier, one of the boats my sister regularly maintained. The pattern of medical supply purchases painted a concerning picture. Cross-referencing dates and items, I realized my sister was dealing with a pregnancy, and based on the timeline, she was approximately 8 months along. The purchases suggested she was preparing for a birth without hospital access, stocking up on supplies that indicated potential complications. I tracked down the local midwife through the teacher who'd approached me. The woman confirmed she'd been treating someone matching my sister's description, but cited patient privacy when I pressed for details. Her expression softened when I showed her family photos, and she quietly mentioned that the pregnancy was high risk, requiring careful monitoring and bed rest. Jake's composure finally cracked during an argument near the harbor master's office. His voice broke as he insisted my sister was terrified of me, that my presence had triggered her panic attacks again, but his words rang hollow. He was projecting his own fears, not hers. The harbor master watched our exchange with interest, clearly reassessing his opinion of Jake. In desperation, Jake offered me $10,000 to leave Alaska immediately. I recorded the conversation on my phone, capturing his admission that he'd been managing my sister's location for years. His bribe attempt revealed more than he intended. It showed he had access to significant funds, likely skimmed from the supply network he controlled. 3 different fishermen approached me over the next 2 days, each reporting similar sightings. They'd seen my sister's boat heading toward the coordinates from her letter just yesterday. She'd been moving slowly, carefully navigating the channels she knew by heart. One mentioned she'd seemed to be preparing for something, loading extra supplies and checking her equipment repeatedly. Earl's journal surfaced in an old storage unit behind the salvage yard. The elderly woman from the marine supply store had kept it safe, waiting for the right moment to share it. The pages detailed my sister's meticulous 5-year plan to disappear completely, with Earl's help in establishing a new identity and building a network of safe houses along the coast. Every detail matched what had actually happened. She'd followed the plan perfectly. Jake's support network consisted primarily of Emma and his cousin the sheriff. As community opinion shifted, his influence waned. The fishermen who'd once deferred to him now questioned his motives openly. Emma herself seemed increasingly uncomfortable with her husband's behavior, especially after learning about the bribe attempt. The marine supply store owner mentioned that a woman matching my sister's description had purchased a specific model of navigation equipment 3 days ago. When I checked the abandoned supply cache again, I found the same equipment model still in its packaging. She'd been preparing for something, stocking multiple locations with identical supplies. Marcus arrived in Anchorage despite my protests, carrying my sister's childhood stuffed whale in his backpack. He'd kept it all these years, hoping to return it to her someday. His presence strengthened my resolve, and together we presented a united front against Jake's intimidation tactics. Our partnership proved effective. While I handled the direct confrontations, Marcus worked on building relationships with the harbor community. His genuine concern for my sister's well-being resonated with people who'd grown suspicious of Jake's controlling behavior. The fishermen especially warmed to Marcus, recognizing a fellow protector rather than a controller. I resisted the urge to contact our parents' legal connections, despite the pressure of frozen accounts and limited resources. Using their influence would have been easy, but it would have betrayed everything my sister had worked to escape. Instead, I relied on the kindness of strangers and the small amount of cash I'd brought. The confrontation at the fuel dock shifted dramatically when I mentioned Earl's death. Jake's guilt became palpable as he admitted he'd failed to prevent his father's deteriorating health while helping others. The admission seemed to break something in him, and for the first time, I saw past his controlling facade to the grieving son underneath. A photo from the local newspaper's community section showed a pregnant woman at a recent fishing cooperative meeting. Though the image was distant and partially obscured, the build and posture matched my sister perfectly. The date placed her in town just a week ago, actively participating in the community she'd helped build. Emma began openly questioning Jake's methods, especially after learning about his attempts to sabotage my boat rental. She mentioned his controlling behavior had escalated since Earl's death, transforming from protective concern into possessive manipulation. Her doubts created visible tension in their relationship. 2 more fishermen offered to guide me to the coordinates, both mentioning they owed my sister significant favors. She'd helped one navigate through a severe storm using her weather prediction models, and guided another's daughter to safety when fleeing an abusive relationship. Their loyalty to her far exceeded any obligation to Jake. I assembled supplies methodically, using my sister's own network of helpers. Each person contributed something small, a map here, a weather radio there, emergency flares from another. The community that had initially closed ranks against me now actively supported my search, recognizing my genuine concern versus Jake's control. Jake confronted me at my motel one final time, his desperation evident. He admitted my sister had made him promise to stop anyone from Phoenix from finding her, but the promise had been extracted years ago, when her fear was fresh and her trust in family non-existent. He couldn't see how circumstances had changed, how his protection had become imprisonment. The harbor master reviewed the boat logs I'd photographed and sided with me completely. His own daughter had been one of my sister's navigation students, and he'd seen firsthand the positive impact she'd had on the community. He provided official documentation supporting my search, effectively neutering Jake's influence at the marina. Jake's options narrowed as more community members voiced support for my search. The network he thought he controlled revealed its true loyalty to my sister, not to him. Even his cousin the sheriff began questioning the inconsistencies in Jake's stories about Earl's death and my sister's circumstances. Emma revealed the final piece of her connection to my sister. They'd met through an online grief counseling group after Emma's miscarriage 2 years ago. My sister had spent hours talking her through the darkest moments, sharing her own pain and healing journey. The bond they'd formed transcended physical distance, built on shared understanding of loss and recovery. I prepared carefully for the journey to the coordinates, ensuring my approach wouldn't stress my pregnant sister. I sent supplies ahead with a trusted fisherman, including a note explaining my intentions and expressing my love and concern. The message was simple. I wasn't there to drag her back, only to make sure she was safe. 5 boat captains volunteered to escort me, creating a small small flotilla of support. They coordinated among themselves, planning the safest route and timing the journey for optimal weather conditions. Their expertise and care demonstrated the respect my sister had earned in this community. Jake's attempts to sabotage the boats failed spectacularly. The owners had anticipated his interference and posted guards at the marina. His increasingly desperate actions only further eroded his credibility. Even Emma distanced herself, taking their daughter to stay with her parents. The sheriff finally saw through Jake's web of lies when the timeline of Earl's death didn't match official records. The death certificate revealed inconsistencies with Jake's version of events, suggesting Earl's death might have been preventable if Jake hadn't been so focused on controlling the refuge network instead of caring for his father. Local news caught wind of the story, but I managed to keep details private. I gave a brief statement about searching for a family member, carefully avoiding any mention of the underground network my sister had built. Protecting her work remained paramount, even as I searched for her. The midwife I'd spoken with earlier approached me privately. While still citing patient confidentiality, she confirmed treating someone matching my sister's description for prenatal care. Her careful words suggested the pregnancy was progressing normally, but would require skilled assistance during delivery. Weather reports indicated a narrow window for safe travel to the coordinates. Storm season was approaching, and the journey would become impossible within days. The urgency forced an immediate decision: leave now or wait months for the next opportunity. Jake's drinking increased as his control slipped away. In vino veritas, the alcohol revealed his deep guilt over Earl's death and his desperate need to control my sister as a way of maintaining connection to his father's legacy. His confession to Marcus confirmed what I'd suspected. He'd twisted Earl's vision of freedom into his own prison of control. The stakes crystallized with brutal clarity. I needed to reach my sister before she either fled again or went into labor in an isolated location. The medical supplies suggested she was preparing for an unassisted birth, a dangerous proposition even for an uncomplicated pregnancy. I demonstrated my growth by organizing the community support without resorting to confrontation or manipulation. Using the same peaceful methods my sister had employed, I built trust through consistent actions and genuine concern. The approach proved far more effective than any aggressive tactics would have been. The entire Harbor community ultimately rejected Jake's fear campaign about my intentions. They'd seen my actions, witnessed my genuine concern, and recognized the difference between protection and control. Their collective support created an unstoppable momentum toward the truth. Earl's detailed notes revealed the careful planning behind my sister's disappearance. Every element had been considered, from establishing new identities to creating sustainable income streams through boat maintenance and navigation instruction. The 5-year timeline suggested she'd planned to surface eventually, but on her own terms. The coordinates with my escort fleet, I finally reached the location, a small island with evidence of long-term habitation. A carefully maintained garden showed 5 years of cultivation, with vegetables and herbs growing in neat rows. A solar panel array provided power, and a freshwater collection system suggested complete self-sufficiency. In a moment of desperation, Jake made a crucial mistake. He called our parents and gave them my sister's location in Washington State. His phone records showed the call duration and timestamp, evidence of his final betrayal of the trust Earl had placed in him. Our parents' response came swiftly. They texted me that they were already in Seattle for a legal conference and could reach Alaska within hours. The message carried their typical tone of authority and expectation, as if 5 years hadn't passed, as if their daughter hadn't fled their toxic influence. As I stood on the beach of my sister's refuge, the full weight of what came next settled on my shoulders. Behind me, my support fleet waited respectfully. Ahead, smoke rose from a chimney, suggesting warmth and life within. The next moments would determine whether 5 years of healing could withstand the collision between past and present. Marcus placed a hand on my shoulder, holding my sister's childhood wail. We'd come this far through trust and patience, not force or manipulation. Whatever happened next, I'd approach it with the same care my sister had shown in building this sanctuary. The coordinates hadn't led to an ending, they'd led to a choice. My sister emerged from the cabin slowly, one hand supporting her swollen belly, the other gripping a fishing rod. The bracelet I'd made her in 7th grade still circled her wrist, the beads faded but intact. Her face showed 5 years of sun and salt, her hair longer and wilder than I remembered. She stopped 20 feet away, studying me with eyes that held both recognition and wariness. Marcus stepped forward with the stuffed whale, setting it gently on a driftwood log between us. My sister's composure cracked slightly at the sight of it. She lowered herself carefully onto a boulder, her movements revealing the advanced stage of her pregnancy. I noticed how she positioned herself with clear sightlines to both the cabin and her boat, ready to flee if necessary. The cabin door opened again, and another woman appeared, younger, with the same watchful stance my sister had developed. They exchanged a look that spoke of shared understanding, the kind that came from surviving similar traumas. This woman moved to stand protectively near my sister, her hand resting on a boat hook. My sister pulled a worn notebook from her jacket and began showing me pages. 5 years of meticulous documentation filled the margins. Not just her escape plan, but evidence of our parents' systematic emotional abuse. Photos of discarded therapy referrals, recordings transcribed in her careful handwriting, copies of emails where they'd dismissed her trauma. The final pages contained therapist notes from someone she'd found here, confirming complex PTSD from both the witnessed violence and our parents' neglect. She turned to entries about Earl, showing how the old fisherman had recognized her desperation and offered not just escape, but purpose. The plan they'd crafted together spanned 18 months of preparation. Earl had taught her everything: navigation, engine repair, weather prediction, and most importantly, how to help others escape their own traumas. His death 3 years ago had left the network vulnerable to Jake's corruption. The friend retrieved a portable ultrasound machine from the cabin, revealing the extent of their self-sufficiency. My sister lay back on a makeshift examination table as her friend checked the baby's position. The screen showed a healthy infant, head down, ready for birth. The equipment was professional grade, clearly obtained through their network of supporters. A calendar on the wall marked her due date as 5 days away. My sister showed me more evidence: years of journal entries detailing our parents' coldness, their refusal to acknowledge her trauma, their obsession with appearances over their daughter's well-being. One entry described finding me after I'd tried to talk to them about her needs, how they'd threatened to cut off my college funding if I pursued therapy for her. I remembered that conversation now, how I'd backed down, choosing my education over her mental health. She gestured toward a desk where manuscripts lay stacked. Under a pseudonym, she'd been writing about trauma, healing, and the ocean's role in her recovery. The income supplemented her boat maintenance work, allowing complete financial independence. Her friend showed me printed emails from readers whose lives had been changed by her words, people who'd found hope in her story of escape and healing. The sound of an approaching boat motor shattered the moment. Jake's vessel rounded the point, moving too fast for the shallow waters. Through binoculars, I could see him at the at the helm, phone pressed to his ear. My sister's breathing quickened, her hand moving protectively to her belly. Her friend began gathering essential supplies, preparing for another escape. Jake beached his boat carelessly, stumbling onto the sand with our parents' voices audible from his phone's speaker. My sister tried to stand but doubled over suddenly, gripping her stomach. Her friend checked her watch, timing something. The stress had triggered labor, just as the midwife had warned might happen. Our parents' demands echoed across the beach through Jake's phone. They insisted on their rights, threatened legal action, spoke of fraud and kidnapping charges. Jake held the phone toward my sister like a weapon, his face twisted with desperation. She shook her head, backing toward the cabin as another contraction hit. Her friend moved between them, brandishing the boat hook with practiced confidence. I positioned myself beside them, creating a barrier between my sister and Jake. Marcus flanked Jake's other side, his presence calm but unmovable. The standoff stretched taut as my sister's breathing grew more labored. Jake's attempts to advance were met with unified resistance. Each time he stepped forward, we stepped back, maintaining the protective circle around my sister. Her contractions were coming faster now, her face flushed with pain and stress. The friend abandoned the boat hook to support her, helping her inside the cabin. Through the window, I could see them preparing for an emergency birth. Clean towels appeared, water boiled on the stove, medical supplies arranged with practiced efficiency. My sister's cries of pain cut through the thin walls as Jake continued ranting about promises and obligations. Our parents' voices grew more shrill through the phone, demanding to speak to their daughter, insisting on their parental rights. Jake's desperation peaked as he tried to push past our human barrier. Marcus caught his arm, redirecting him firmly but gently back toward his boat. The physical confrontation Jake wanted never materialized. We simply stood firm, protecting the cabin's entrance. The friend appeared briefly at the door, gesturing urgently. The baby was coming now. I had to choose, maintain the barrier against Jake and our parents, or help with the birth. The decision came instantly. I entered the cabin, leaving Marcus to handle Jake alone. Inside, my sister labored on a carefully prepared bed, her face streaked with sweat and tears. Her friend coached her through each contraction with surprising expertise. I took my sister's hand, feeling her grip tighten with each wave of pain. Together, we worked through the ancient rhythm of birth, the outside chaos fading against this primal focus. The baby crowned just as Jake's shouts reached a crescendo outside. My sister bore down with fierce determination, bringing new life into the world as her old life raged impotently beyond the walls. The infant emerged in a rush of fluid and blood, immediately voicing its displeasure with sharp, healthy cries. A boy. My sister cradled him against her chest, tears streaming as she whispered a name, Earl Phoenix, the perfect combination of her refuge and the home she'd fled. Her friend clamped and cut the cord with steady hands while I helped clean the baby with warm towels. Through the window, I saw our parents had arrived. They stood on the beach in their expensive clothes, looking utterly out of place against the wild backdrop. Mother clutched Father's arm, her face a mask of fury as she surveyed the humble cabin. Father's expression showed the same cold calculation I remembered from childhood, already planning legal strategies. They approached the cabin with Jake trailing behind, but Marcus stood firm at the door. Mother's demands for entry grew shrill, while Father threatened consequences with the same tone he'd used to dismiss my sister's trauma. Their words penetrated the thin walls, but my sister focused only on her newborn son, counting his fingers and toes. The friend opened the door slightly, just enough for our parents to see their daughter nursing their grandchild. The sight stopped Mother mid-tirade. Father's legal threats faltered as he processed the reality. His daughter had built a life entirely without them, had created a family that didn't include their toxic influence. Mother tried emotional manipulation next, speaking of missed opportunities and family bonds, but her words rang hollow against the evidence of 5 years of abandonment. Father shifted to financial incentives, mentioning inheritance and trust funds. My sister didn't even look up, too absorbed in her son's perfect features. Jake made one last desperate play, claiming guardianship rights based on his father's connection. Emma's arrival destroyed that fantasy. She'd driven through the night with documentation of Jake's financial exploitation of the refuge network, his drinking, his controlling behavior. Her testimony to the harbor master, who'd followed the convoy out of concern, ended Jake's influence permanently. Our parents stood on that beach for another hour, alternating between threats and pleas, but faced with a united front of chosen family, Marcus, Emma, the midwife who'd arrived to check the baby, several fishermen who'd anchored nearby in solidarity, their power evaporated. They left as the sun set, their rental car disappearing into the gathering darkness. Jake accepted his banishment with broken resignation. Emma filed for divorce that very night, choosing freedom over complicity. The harbor master documented everything, ensuring official protection for my sister's sanctuary. The refuge network would continue, but with new safeguards against corruption. My sister recovered quickly, supported by her chosen family. The friend revealed her own story. Parents who'd refused to believe her assault, who'd chosen their church's reputation over their daughter's truth. Together, they built something our biological families never could, a home based on understanding and unconditional support. 2 weeks later, my sister invited me to stay, not in the main cabin, but on an adjacent plot where I could build my own small shelter. The invitation came with conditions: respect for their privacy, commitment to the refuge's mission, and acceptance that some wounds never fully healed. I accepted immediately. 6 months later, I taught navigation to trauma survivors, while my sister wrote and raised Earl Phoenix with her chosen family. Our parents sent one letter attempting reconciliation, but accepted silence as their answer. The coordinates in that letter hadn't led to reconciliation. They'd led to recognition that sometimes the only way to truly live is to leave behind those who refuse to see your pain. The refuge continued as my sister's private healing space, a testament to the truth that family isn't about blood, but about who shows up when the storms come.